Let me tell you something most people won't say out loud. Being too friendly is costing you respect. You think being available makes you valuable? No, it makes you replaceable. People don't chase what's always in reach. They chase what's rare. If you keep giving all of you to everyone, don't be surprised when no one values what you bring. Today we stop the performance. Today you learn to protect your power. It's important to understand the difference between being kind and being accessible to everyone at all times. Kindness is a virtue. Being polite, being helpful, showing warmth. But when kindness turns into constant availability, it begins to lose its value. People start to assume you'll always be there, that your time and energy are endless, and they begin to treat you accordingly. The truth is, the more accessible you make yourself to everyone, the more they assume you have nothing else going on. People don't value what's handed to them without effort. The problem with being too friendly, too open, and too accessible is that it removes the element of scarcity, and without scarcity, there's no perceived value. If everyone can have a piece of you, no one sees the full worth of who you are. It's like water from a tap, easy to get, always flowing, rarely appreciated. But when something is rare, like a limited edition, like time with someone who guards their energy, that's when people start to lean in. That's when they listen. That's when they respect. Boundaries are not about being rude or cold. They're about self-respect. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. If you tolerate being interrupted, overlooked, or used as a backup plan, then that becomes your role in their life. But if you set standards, if you say, this is my time, this is my space, and this is how I operate, people start to take notice. They either rise to meet your level, or they walk away, and either outcome is a win. Being kind doesn't mean always being available. You can smile without surrendering your priorities. You can help without handing over your schedule. In fact, when you operate with purpose and boundaries, your kindness becomes more powerful because it's not routine, it's intentional, it's deliberate. And that's what makes it matter. People remember generosity that comes with strength. They forget the person who's always there because they assume they always will be. People respect what they have to work for. If your attention, your time, your presence is something they have to earn, they will show up differently. They'll call instead of just texting. They'll plan instead of dropping in. They'll respect your space because you've made it clear that it's not open to just anyone, anytime. And it's not about being arrogant, it's about knowing your worth. It's about realizing that you're not obligated to be liked by everyone. You're not here to please the world. You're here to grow, to build, to create a life of meaning. And that requires focus, that requires energy, that requires protecting your peace. When you're too friendly, too open, you end up saying yes to things that drain you. You give your time away like it's unlimited. But time is the one resource you can't get back. Every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that matters. Every time you make yourself overly available to someone who doesn't value it, you take away energy from your goals, your growth, your peace. And over time you become resentful. Not because people changed, but because you didn't draw the line. So instead of trying to be everywhere for everyone, start choosing carefully. Choose where your time goes. Choose who gets your energy. Choose when to be available. Not everyone deserves front row access to your life. That kind of access should be earned, not just given away freely in the name of being nice. Being kind is powerful. Being available to everyone, that's draining. Be the person who helps when it matters, but not the one who's always on call. That's how you protect your value. That's how you teach the world to treat you right. When you give too much too soon, you unintentionally teach people that what you offer doesn't require effort to earn. This is one of the most common traps people fall into, especially those with a big heart and a desire to be accepted. Whether it's your time, attention, affection, or support, giving without restraint might feel generous, but it often leads to being overlooked or taken for granted. Human nature is simple in this regard. We don't deeply value what we didn't have to work for. When something is easily attained, it's rarely respected. Relationships, whether professional or personal, are built on a balance of value and effort. When you enter a situation trying to prove your worth, by doing too much, offering too quickly, always saying yes, you shift that balance. The other person doesn't have to invest. They don't have to show appreciation Why? Because you've already given them everything, often without asking for anything in return. And over time, they start to expect that version of you. You become the go-to, the fix-it person, the one who always makes the sacrifice. And what was once a gesture of goodwill becomes an unpaid obligation. There's a difference between generosity and people-pleasing. Generosity is thoughtful and measured. It gives from a full cup. People-pleasing, on the other hand, gives from a place of fear, the fear of rejection, of not being enough, of being left out. So you give more. You give faster. You try to secure someone's approval by offering parts of yourself they haven't earned. And instead of gaining their respect, you actually lose it, because respect doesn't come from giving. It comes from giving wisely. Think of it like this. If someone walks into a store and is immediately handed a product for free, they might take it, but they're not going to treat it like it's valuable. They didn't pay for it, they didn't earn it, it cost them nothing. But if that same item was locked behind a glass case, with a price tag that made them pause and think, suddenly it holds more weight. They pay attention to how they handle it. They remember what it cost. That's how people treat your time, your presence and your support, based on what it cost them to earn it. When you rush in to solve other people's problems, always say yes, or constantly make yourself available without them asking or deserving. You rob them of the opportunity to meet you halfway. You rob them of the lesson. You carry the burden and they get used to not carrying any. You teach them that your time isn't valuable because you give it away so freely. And once that lesson is learned, it's hard to unteach. You may think you're being helpful, but if your help is not balanced with standards, you're just reinforcing dependency and diminishing your own worth. People may smile at you, thank you, and even lean on you, but deep down they don't respect you the way they would someone who requires effort, someone who holds a standard, someone who makes others earn their presence. It's not cold. It's not selfish. It's strategic. It's mature. It's necessary. You have to remember that how you start sets the tone. If you give too much in the beginning, it becomes the expectation. And when you try to pull back later, people don't say, oh, they've learned to set healthy boundaries. No, they get offended. They say, you've changed. But in truth, you didn't change. You just stopped overgiving. You stopped bending. You stopped letting your need to be liked run your life. And that's when you start to see who's really there for you and who was only there for what you could offer. The world doesn't reward desperation. It rewards clarity. When you know your value, you don't offer it to everyone at once. You observe, you assess. You allow people to show you who they are before you pour into them. That's not being cold, that's protecting what's sacred. Because once people know they have to show up with respect to receive your time, they start to rise, they start to listen, they start to treat you as someone worth earning, not just someone who gives everything away for free. Your presence is not something to be handed out without thought. It's a privilege, not a product on discount. The moment you start treating yourself like a commodity that anyone can access, anytime, without cost or effort, you invite the world to undervalue you. Just like any high-value item, exclusivity creates desire, and desire creates respect. When you position yourself as always available, always agreeable, and always within reach, people stop looking at you with appreciation. Instead, they start looking at you with expectation. And expectation turns into entitlement faster than most realize. People pay attention to what requires effort. If you walk into a high-end store and see the merchandise behind glass, neatly displayed, protected, your perception shifts. You stand up straighter, you move slower, you speak with more care, not because someone told you to, but because the environment and the energy demand it. On the other hand, if you walk into a clearance bin with signs shouting, everything must go, there's no urgency to be respectful, no reason to hesitate, the product has been marked as something anyone can grab. That's what happens when you don't guard your energy. You become a clearance item in someone else's life. You are not here to convince anyone of your value. You are not required to lower your standards, so someone else feels comfortable. The more you operate from a place of self-worth, the less explaining you have to do. You don't have to sell yourself. You don't have to chase. You don't have to prove. When you understand your value, you carry yourself differently. and people respond to that. Your tone changes, your pace slows, you become less reactive and more intentional. And suddenly, the same people who used to overlook you start to take notice, not because you shouted louder, but because your presence started speaking for itself. There is a big difference between being liked and being respected. Being liked often means bending, shrinking, saying yes when you mean no, and smiling through discomfort. Being respected means standing firm, honoring your time, and communicating with clarity. Not everyone will like you when you draw lines, when you say not now, when you stop showing up out of obligation, but the right ones will, the ones who see your value without you having to perform for it, the ones who understand that your presence is a gift, not a guarantee. Your energy is your currency. Every conversation you entertain, every room you walk into, every hand you extend, that's an investment. The question is, are you investing in people who see your worth, or are you spending your energy trying to prove it to people who never will? If you have to constantly remind someone what you bring to the table, you're probably sitting at the wrong table. You should never have to plead for respect. Respect flows naturally when people recognize that you're not desperate to be seen. Start carrying yourself like you know what you bring. When you walk into a room, know that your energy is not meant for everyone. When someone gets access to your time, your wisdom, or your attention, that should mean something. That should be earned, not expected. And if someone doesn't see the value in what you offer, that's not your cue to lower the price. That's your sign to walk away with your dignity intact. People don't respect what they can get too easily. They respect what challenges them. They respect what demands more, and most of all, they respect what respects itself. You don't have to be arrogant. You don't have to be unkind. You just have to be clear. Clear about your time. Clear about your standards. Clear about what kind of treatment you allow. And when you operate with that clarity, people start adjusting their behavior. They stop assuming you'll always be there. They start realizing they have to step up if they want to stay in your life. That shift changes everything. Not just how others treat you, but how you begin to treat yourself. Respect isn't built on how often you show up. It's built on the value you bring when you do. Being everywhere for everyone all the time doesn't make you respected. It makes you invisible. When your presence becomes constant noise, people stop hearing you. They stop noticing. They stop valuing. There's a difference between being busy and being valuable. There's a difference between being well-liked and being well-respected. And that difference often comes down to how you use your voice, your time, and your energy. Many people believe that if they just show up more, say more, give more, that somehow they'll earn the respect they crave. But volume doesn't create value. You can flood a room with your words, your efforts, your kindness, and still be overlooked. Why? Because people aren't responding to the volume of your efforts. They're responding to the quality of your presence. They're responding to how you carry yourself, to the boundaries you set, to the energy you demand without even saying a word. When you carry yourself with purpose, you don't have to say much. You don't have to raise your voice. Your silence begins to speak for you. Your restraint becomes power. People start noticing what you don't say when you choose not to respond, when you choose not to be everywhere. That's where real respect lives, in the quiet strength of someone who knows they don't need to perform to be valued. If you always answer every call, agree to every request, and jump in to fix every situation, people don't think, wow, what a dependable person. Over time, they start thinking, they'll always do it no matter what. That's not respect, that's expectation, that's convenience. Respect happens when people know you can be counted on, but understand they have to approach you with intention. It's not about being difficult, it's about being discerning. When you hold your energy like it matters, others begin to treat it with care. Being respected means being willing to disappoint people in the short term, so they understand your value in the long term. It means saying no without guilt. It means letting go of the need to explain your every decision. People don't need a paragraph when you say, I'm not available. They need consistency. They need to see that you mean what you say and that you're not moved by pressure. That kind of discipline doesn't make you hard. It makes you respected. Your value is not in how loud you are or how present you are. It's in the weight of your presence when you choose to engage. Some people walk into a room and change nothing. Others walk in silently and everything shifts. That's not charisma. That's presence developed through discipline, self-awareness, and self-respect. When people sense you're not easily swayed, when they know you're not desperate to be seen, they begin to pay attention in a different way. You can't earn deep respect by being overly available or overly agreeable. That leads to being liked, sure, but being liked is often temporary based on what you provide. Being respected is lasting. It's based on who you are, and that identity is formed by how you carry yourself when nobody is watching, by the standards you keep when it would be easier to just give in. When you speak less but mean more, when you show up less but contribute deeply, when you don't rush to please but remain firm in your values, people shift their posture around you. They speak more carefully, they listen more attentively, they pause before making a request, because they've learned that your energy isn't up for grabs, and that lesson doesn't come from noise, it comes from strength, the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard, the kind of presence that demands respect, not because it asks for it, but because it lives it.